don't be afraid to quit, right? Like if we were going to go all the way back to law school, if we were going to go through what I was saying earlier about decisions in your life, and sometimes we do make the wrong ones, and don't even think about it necessarily as quitting. I would say maybe like, don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to pivot. If it's not working for you and you've given it like the old college try, right? Like you gave it your best, you can let go. Like yoga, you'll hear it. Teachers will tell you, inhale, let, exhale, go. Sometimes you need to let go. Sometimes you need to quit. Sometimes you need to pivot. Sometimes you need to be afraid. Sometimes you need to fall down. But all of those experiences end up being, I think, the biggest building blocks to where you really ultimately want to be and probably need to be, if you allow yourself the grace and the compassion and the kindness, right? Mm-hmm. The kindness to do that the same way you would for someone you love, the same way you would for a little kid. You'd be like, that's okay, you tried your hardest, like that was more than enough, you don't have to keep doing this. Figuring out how to show that to yourself.
Let's link up with Krysta on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hello, FYX listeners, and welcome to episode 63 of the FYX Podcast. I'm host, Krysta Huber, and I am back with a special series to kick off the month of March. I can't believe it's a new month. We are into our third month of 2022, and I hope you are in a place, in a space, in an environment, in a mindset where you feel like you're being true to yourself, you're being honest about what you want to accomplish, and being honest about making the steps, taking the steps, making the necessary changes, whatever that looks like for you, that you need to do to be getting there. If you guys didn't know this, March is Women's History Month, and I am very lucky to always have badass female guests that come on this show. But I thought, why not? Let's lean into that a little bit more and just really focus in on amazing women all throughout the month of March. And to that end, I'm really personally honored to introduce today's guest because she is a friend, a coworker of mine, a mom, a yogi, and genuinely just a person that I really admire and look up to. And I've gotten to know in a really short amount of time and would describe her like somebody that I've known my entire life. That is Bridget Riepl. Now, Bridget is only hearing this introduction for the first time because I recorded it after our conversation. And I've actually had a couple weeks to kind of think about what we talked about. And in that time, we go through our own life experiences. And she and I have been working on various projects because we work together at the Fort Athletic Club, which you'll hear us plug throughout this conversation. And she is just somebody that I respect because we were having conversation not too long ago, like literally 2 or 3 days ago. And we were talking about changing, and we were talking about your identity changing and waking up from one day to the next. And over time, as the days and months go by and the years compound, not being the person that you once were, and how a lot of people tend to play small. They tend to put themselves inside of a box, and a lot of other people tend to want to keep them there. And I really think that's worth bringing up because Bridget is somebody who is the complete opposite of all of those things. And I think you guys will hear from this conversation how she thinks about her role as a mom, her role as a yoga instructor, her role as somebody who's a part of the world of fitness and where she fits into that, and where her unique take on so many different topics. That's why I always love talking to her, that, and she has a great sense of humor. So I always laugh throughout our conversations. And she is just somebody that I'm really grateful to have a part of my team, both in a professional sense and in a personal sense too. So I couldn't think of a better guest to kick off this effort for the month of March. I've got some incredible ladies lined up for you guys, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. So remember, if you like it, share it with a friend, tell somebody about the Fix. It costs you literally $0.00. And we just appreciate you showing up every single week and checking out what the show's all about and what my guests care to talk about week after week. As always, though, if you want to hear something and there's anything that's on your mind, or you think that there's a topic that might be worth exploring, reach out to me, shoot me a DM. I'm reachable at the Krysta Huber on Instagram, as well as at the FYX.officialpod. And let's hand it over to Bridget. Who is Bridget Riepl? But more specifically, why should we care about what she has to say in this episode for the FYX?
It's such an interesting question, and thanks for having me and having me on, because my mind, and I think so many of us, go to a place of like, who am I in this situation, right? So like right now I'm like, oh, who am I on Krysta's podcast? And like, I've known you long enough and well enough to know what you do and what you talk about. And that is such a tendency that I know I have, and so many of us do. Like, how can I fit really well into like the box of that conversation? And I can, because I teach yoga and I'm in the fitness industry and I care a lot about health and wellness and nutrition. And I've gone through the vegan thing and I've tried the juice cleanse thing. So like, when I think about what you do and who you are, there's so much, right? That I would like immediately in my own mind of like, let me be the people pleaser who can fit into Krysta's podcast really well. But if you took me out of this situation and you plot me down at the PTO meeting, then I'm like a mom with 9-year-old twins, and I'm in the little town and I'm doing all the little things, and I'm like at the cupcake store and making the Valentines. So for me to say who I am is almost a challenge, because I want to be a lot of things in a lot of different situations.
You are a lot of things.
And I don't think I'm a person who has like one big thing. I'm always very enamored with people who can go on LinkedIn and be like, I'm the this of this. Because I'm always like, I'm a little bit of this, I'm a little bit of that, a sprinkle of this. So if I was just going to give you like the 45-second of like who I think probably I am, the oldest of 4 kids that grew up in New Jersey, always loved the Jersey Shore, spent time there my entire life, went through school, super overachiever, Loyola Maryland graduated, creative writing degree, went to law school, was in law school my second semester and was like, I'm not going to do this forever. For some reason, kept doing it, kept doing it very consistently till got married, got pregnant. I found out it was twins, was put on bed rest for 5 months. They came home after 2 weeks in the NICU on heart and breathing monitors, way led on to way, never went back to the law firm. My blue sports coat of like that original navy blue suit that everyone buys for interviews is probably still there in a box somewhere. But I did continue to work part-time for them as I built up this career in yoga and wellness that I'm really, interestingly, and I think so many people in the fitness world would say, like, still figuring out every day. Like, that is such an evolving universe, to the point that there are days when I miss being able to say lawyer, because that's so easy. That's like the LinkedIn title, right? Mm-hmm. An amazing job. But for me, at this point in my life, it is so many different things and places and people that are pulling, calling, shouting, driving, running, whatever it is. So I don't know why anyone would care unless someone is sitting at home being like, oh my God, that's me too. In which case they might care a lot. Because like many of us out there who, I remember even in high school having a teacher, she was the careers teacher. My high school had a class that you went through and you got to do like those cool little surveys about when you grow up.
Sure.
She's like, you know, the average person has 7 different careers in their life.
Wow, I never knew that.
I don't even know if it's true, but actually she really hilariously then said, she was like, I'm on number 5 and rapidly awaiting number 6. And we were like, oh. But, you know, I do think that maybe my life experience speaks to that in a good way. So maybe that's a little bit of the caring, or hopefully everyone, because they care about you and you do a kick-ass podcast.
Well, thank you. But I'm really happy. Leave it to Bridget, because I know you. So I was expecting something profound from this question. And, you know, in you saying like, this is an interesting question and it's a challenging one to answer. Obviously, I do that on purpose a little bit. But what I found in just the evolution of interviewing people for this show specifically and just interacting with potential guests, The reason why I word this the way that I do, and I'm giving a little tip to anybody who may be listening to this and is a future guest on my show, is because I found that most people have a tendency to, when you ask, like, who are you? Like, what do we want to know about this person's story? They always lead with everything you said second. They always lead with, I'm a mom of two, I'm a wife, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I realized, like, that's actually not who you are, because it doesn't necessarily, those are the roles that you play. And yes, they're a part of you. They're a part of your identity, but like to the core of it, I've just noticed the shift in the responses that I tend to get. And you nailed it. You're the perfect example of everything you just said, is that for some reason, when I add on like the, why should we care about you specifically? I just get this like very reflective, somebody takes a quick second, a quick pause. They want to answer as quickly as they can, but I'm almost forcing them to be like, hey, you got to kind of like parse through this a little bit. And then of course we wind up getting the context of like why you're on the show, how that's relevant, you know, you being in the yoga world, etc. But yeah, just kind of peeling back the onion and understanding my thought process behind that. It is definitely on purpose. And I'm really excited to get into all of this, because I think you really worked in something that is definitely going to come up more than once in this conversation, and saying that you're still trying to figure out your role in the fitness space in particular, because it's really cool to hear that. And I mean cool with a lot of intent, because I have a lot of respect for you as somebody who's been doing yoga for 11 years. So to say that you're still figuring this out, that, and you're a veteran in my eyes for someone who's been teaching for as long as you have, like it's one, reassuring, but two, shows that this space is just, it's different, right? It's gotten really different in the last 2 years, but it's ever changing. And I love that you respect that and you take it for what it is. And I think you just took the whole question for what it is too, and being so honest with your answer. So thank you for all that. Now, before we get into the nitty gritty of everything, I like to keep my first half of the show a little bit more fun, and then we'll get into the deep details, and then we go back to the fun at the end. But you know, I'm a huge coffee drinker. You know, I'm a bit of a coffee snob as well. So I asked all of my guests what their go-to coffee order is. And I think I know yours, since I do see you every day at work, but I've given you a little bit of grief for your coffee sometimes. So I really want to know, like, what's your like special coffee? Like, if you were just going to really like treat yourself, indulge in a cup of coffee, like what is it? Where is it from? Give me all the details. Are you making it at home? Everything.
You're going to hate the answer, because
I know.
Black ice coffee. I don't have particular locations that it has to be from. I do love the nitro ice coffee that Coffee Surf does, which we happen to have at the Fort where both Krysta and I work and teach. But ultimately, I will take a iced coffee any season, any day, but like sub 10 degrees.
We have that in common.
I drink it like it's water, which is a terrible quality. A day, another terrible quality. If I was going to be like indulgent, fabulous dinner, I go double espresso with like the lemon rind curls.
Oh.
And if I am feeling like I need something, I love coffee. I could drink coffee all day. Like if I'm feeling like I need something a little cozier, I would probably say almond milk latte. But if I'm doing an almond milk latte, I want it to be like very foam dense, not
frothy.
Just like, but none of it needs to be from like somewhere special. I do love Rook, which Krysta often has the Rook coffee cup. If I was doing theirs, it would be iced New Orleans with almond milk. I can tell you that. But I will pretty much take coffee in any form at any place. The best coffee cup I've ever had in my entire life was at a gas station in Rincon, Puerto Rico. So I don't know. I don't know what that tells you about me.
Well, we are one in the same in that I don't care what the temperature is outside. I always have iced coffee, like always. I don't care if it's literally -2. There's just something about, for me, here's my theory. And maybe you can relate to this, because somebody asked me the other day, and this was my answer as to why. I think a lot of it actually has to do with being in the fitness industry, because most of the time when I'm drinking my first cup of coffee, it's not like, oh, let me like enjoy this at my computer while I'm multitasking on something else. It's like, I need that energy. I'm going to teach a class and like, I need to sip on it really quick. So I just can't wait for it to not be hot anymore. That's my, like, I don't know if like that's really why, but I feel like that's how I got to the love for it that I have today.
Definitely. You need it to be quick. You need it to be cold because we're getting our voice ready. Because what we do have to be like a couple volumes than like the average person, right? So all of that, I will tell you, I had a hilarious moment. I'm 39 years old of feeling very old today because I was at the coffee bar and the guy working there was like, oh yeah, I don't even drink coffee. I drink Red Bull. And I was like, do you know how bad that is for your stomach? And I called myself, and he was like 22. I was like, well, when I was 22, people were really overdoing the Red Bull situation and they were getting like ulcers. So like, I think that you need to not. And then I just was like, Bridget, stop. You're really sounding old right now. Meanwhile, I'm sucking down my coffee, which is like also not great for the stomach.
Well, regardless of your age, I'm still with you. I'm still with you on the Red Bull thing. So I think I would have made that comment too. So it's okay. If that makes you feel any better.
Health expert. So I give no one any advice on this topic.
Well, even if you're not considering yourself a health expert, which is totally fine. There's a lot of stuff that we both agreed that we want to get into today, but I want to start just in jumping off the first question and talking a little bit about your career and specifically, I didn't know this part of your story. So this is why I want to start here. I had no idea that you realized that early into law school that you knew you weren't going to do this forever. And I want to talk about that because, as you know, I have had a lot of job changes in my life and just a lot of personal changes in the last 2 years in particular. So that's something that just really jumps out and speaks to me. And the reason why I want to start here is because you also very quickly followed up with the fact that you kept doing it anyway. So let's get into that. Let's talk about like, what was it that when you were only in semester 2, and everyone says the first year is like the toughest year of law school from what I've been told, because I have explored that path and quickly realized that it was not the route for me to go. But what made you realize like, hey, this wasn't going to be my forever thing? And then as the follow-up question that you know is coming, why'd you do it anyway?
I realized that the whole legal field was not for me when I started doing any level of research into like internship, summer associate, which for anyone listening that's considering going to law school, I highly recommend you go work at a law firm for even like 3 months and make sure that the environment is what you're interested in. Because I loved academics. I loved reading. I loved writing. So many of the things that were a part of the law school experience spoke to what I enjoy and kind of like where my talents are.
Yeah. And I feel like people say that all the time. Like, I felt like that's why I got that guidance to go to law school was because I like to write. And then when I talked to actual lawyers, I was like, I don't think this is a good reason to go.
No. And being a lawyer is a ton of work in the sense of FaceTime, grinding, going out to like dinners with people you don't necessarily want to be at dinner with, political fundraiser-y type of stuff where you have to like pretend to be interested in things or agree sometimes with things that are like not in line with how you feel or what you think. And the sitting there, the billable hours, the just work on top of work on top of work, and then forced socializing, like those aspects just were not for me. Like the experience of being a lawyer in the type of firm also maybe that I went to, like there's a lot of different paths that you could explore. I think that if I had before law school went and worked at just like your very atypical law firm that maybe does like defense sort of litigation, which is what I ended up doing, I would have been like, wow, this is not the right thing. I just didn't realize that before I started school. Yeah. I just kind of school and I did enjoy law school. And there were aspects of being a lawyer that I really enjoyed, but I don't think the schedule and the billing, and then also this definitely like the forced social side of it was not for me.
So recognizing that as quickly as you did, what made you hang on for quite a while before, obviously with having your children, I know that was like a big turning event for you, just especially with being on bed rest. Like I can't imagine what that transition was like, which I do want to talk about as a mom. But before we get there, what was it for you that you were like, well, I'm just going to keep doing this?
I mean,
did you feel like you just had made that commitment and you had to see it through?
Definitely the stigma of quitting. And then also like money that you've already invested. And I will say, having a little bit of the ability to step outside of myself. I started doing yoga when I was a junior in college. I was very into it by the time I was going to college.
Okay.
And I was in something where one of the very repetitive, and it needs to be repeated lessons, is to like, don't be reactive. Right. So to me, and I was like, oh, I don't think I like this. It was like, yeah, but you've invested all this time and this money and this energy, and you put it out there. Like, don't be reactive and do something you're going to regret. So I think I just clung to that. And then all of a sudden you just spent another $50,000. And now you're like, well, now I've sunk so much money into this. I should definitely see it through. Yeah. Oh, and this is always going to serve you in some way, somehow, somewhere. And it does. So I'm not even going to disagree with that reality. But it was such a just like a rolling ball or like a domino effect of, right? Like, I made the decision. Now I'm in the decision. Now I've already done this many classes. Why would I quit at this point? I've said I'm doing it. It's on Facebook. It's out in the universe. It's like so embarrassing to quit. And I mean, raise your hand if you don't think quitting is embarrassing. I don't think there would be that many hands in the air. Like most of us.
Yep. I'm smiling real big.
Cool, the thought of quitting something, like, especially if you're the type of person who's lived your whole life as like a follow through type of individual. And that's definitely how I was raised.
Yeah, I hear you 100%. And in knowing how invested you were in yoga at this point, give us the context of the timeline for you when you officially decided that you loved yoga so much that you wanted to teach. Was that thought just kind of like wandering in the back of your mind as you started to realize that being a lawyer wasn't for you? Like, did the idea of Bridget, yoga teacher, pop into your head at any point at this point in your life? Was it there?
Sure, but not necessarily as like, if I didn't do this, I would do this. Like, I didn't see it as like a direct career type of jump.
Sure.
When I started doing yoga, like I said, my junior year in college, yoga teachers were not like young Instagram models.
The way they are today. Yeah, not at all. There's been a big shift in that.
Yes. When I first was doing yoga, like, number one, you couldn't even consider signing up for a yoga training unless you practiced at that yoga studio. You had been there for like a minimum of 2 years, and they knew you to have a consistent practice of like 4 or 5 days a week. It was not something where people were promoting it on, a Facebook feed, and they were like, oh, if you apply, come to this meeting and like, we'll pop you into our program and you'll graduate in 4 months. It was 200 hours in person. There was only 5 people in my training. There were tests. There were practicums. You had to like present and teach in every single session. It was a very different thing. And like, you didn't go into that blindly. So I came up in yoga having extreme respect for all the people who I went to as a student, right? I'm not one of those, I'm trying to stay away from saying like my teacher, and definitely the term guru, because like, I'm just not a believer in that. I think you learn from lots of different people. If you're going to live your best life, you need tons of different perspectives. I think that I can learn something about yoga from you, Krysta. I think I can learn it from, my neighbor across the street who needs help with their groceries. There's always lessons to be learned, because really the tenets of yoga are supposed to be based in compassion and kindness and service. Like, I don't care how beautiful your triangle pose is. Like, I care about how beautiful your soul is.
Yeah. And I feel that for you and like everything you do, Bridget, because something that I really respect about you as a fitness, I'm going to call you fitness expert, because you are a fitness expert. I want you to own that you have the most like diverse, you're one of the most diverse athletes I know. Like, I wouldn't have pegged you as a yoga person in my mind of what I think of when I think of a yogi. And I kind of identify as well with a lot of what you just said about how difficult it was at one point to become a yoga instructor, because I think back to when I was in high school, and like, my mom had a friend who was a yoga teacher. It took her years, and like, it was like this really challenging thing. And as a swimmer, we did like our dry land training. We did a lot of yoga, and it was such a different environment than it is today. And whether that's good or bad, we can talk about, but I just think like, I know that you live out exactly what you just said, because you're one of those people that I like don't know what class you're going to take next. And you totally surprised me when we first met, because I expected you to be that I only do yoga. Like, yoga is my sanctuary and that's my fitness. You're like a Peloton junkie, let's be real. And you'll show up in all different types of classes. And I really admire that about you, because I think a lot of people can get like stuck in their lane. That's just a little aside, but keep going. So like, it wasn't in the forefront of your mind.
But let me say what's so funny about that. I personally, like so many students, people that I know that do yoga and did yoga, like are very one track and like that's what they enjoy. That's all they're going to do.
That's so not you. Like, I don't think of you like that at all. That's like the antithesis of Bridget.
But the whole idea of yoga is supposed to be to get unstuck.
Sure.
To like not just be in one lane, to be open-minded, to be multifaceted. And like, I'm not a yoga pusher either. Like if someone's like, I hate yoga, I'm like, that's fine. You know, because I think people find it either out of inspiration or desperation. Like, I don't ever want to be dragging someone kicking and screaming to a yoga class and be like, okay, now you have to like this. But like, if you've moved through a lot of different fitness modalities and you find yourself that you continually are getting injured, or if you're going through something like really hard in your life and you feel like you need something a little more spiritual, a little more emotional, and that desperation brings you to yoga and you fall in love, that's amazing. If you're inspired by anything from, you know, crystals to oils to the person next to you that you're like, oh, wow, your arms are amazing. And they're like, chaturangas, whatever it is. I don't care. Like if that inspiration is what brings you to yoga, whatever is the reason you show up, most people that stay for something else. They find something else that becomes important and powerful for them. And that's not for me to decide. It's just for me to be there and hopefully give invitations, right? Opportunities and invitations. Like, hey, give this a try. See if this works for you. If it doesn't, that's all good. And like, I hope you find what works for you. For me, in this industry, this world, if every single person that I come in contact with can find something that they love enough that's going to get them to move every day, I feel like I somehow spread like the message of yoga, of getting unstuck from like that discomfort, that not disease, but like dis-ease, like lack of ease that comes from when you're just stagnant.
Totally. That's so powerful. It's so true. I think, I don't know why people get like that, because it's not just specific to yoga, right? Like I can even see this a lot with, there's one thing to be said for, yes, there's a lot of value in resistance training. And I would be the first to harp on the fact that everyone should be doing that. But like some people, and it's not to pick on anything, this is just the first thing that popped into my mind, like people who really love spin or cycle, it's like the only thing they'll do. And they like, don't like you if you don't want to do that with them too. And I don't know why that's gotten to be the way that it is. And I don't know if it's, I'm hopeful that it's changing. I think even the work that we do at the Fort is like an effort to kind of change that mentality because of what we offer, right? With having all 4 studios that you can get that kind of different experience. But it's really interesting. Like people just like fall into their boxes and then that's like what they do. And that's how they work out. And that's the only way to work out. And I see that even with eating as well.
Well, don't you think so much of it comes, like the vast majority of our motivations are in some way rooted in fear. So let's say that you were, you know, when you had your kids, you gained 50 pounds in your pregnancies and you did spin and lost that 50 pounds. There's a little bit of fear in the back of your head. That's like, if I stop spinning. Yeah. You know, if I haven't eaten fried foods in years, if I eat something fried, I'm going to, you know, this is going to happen. I hurt my knee once years ago doing a box jump. And if I ever do a box jump again, I'm going to get hurt again. Like, I feel like a lot of us get stuck in a rut or a lane because we're really afraid of what would happen if we changed lanes in any way.
I couldn't agree with a truer statement. I couldn't say amen enough times to fully acknowledge what you're saying, because that was so much of my life through 2020. Like I just recorded another podcast episode and a similar topic kind of came up with my guest in a different way, but it still falls into the same bucket of just like not being prepared for adversity because I hated the idea of change. And I couldn't wrap my head around this idea that the only thing guaranteed in life is that things are going to change. But I didn't like that things weren't fitting inside of my vision of the plan that I saw for myself and the trajectory that I thought I was supposed to be on from age 18. And the fact that by 25 or 26, I was like, I'd already pivoted once from it. And then I was really going to pivot again. Honestly, that's why I asked you this question in the first place, because I identified with that piece of your story of like this struggle to like, should I keep doing something? I think a lot of that does come from fear, right? Like we're talking in the context of like, you figure out what works and then you keep doing it, but it also applies in the other sense too, right? Like in every aspect of your life, it's not just your fitness. It's just like how you operate.
Right. And life is a series of choices. And sometimes we make the wrong choices and we have to have regret and we have to have lows, or we would also like honestly never even understand that we have highs. So we're going into each decision knowing that like we could screw up, right? And we couldn't. So that's scary too. But
very.
I say all the time with regard to kids, especially, like I know my kids, I think as years go on and life goes on, parents just try to make things more perfect for their kids, right? It's like this huge running joke right now that like all kids, all of us sort of that are in that, I would say like 30 to 45-ish even range, maybe older. It's like you were raised by parents from that boomer generation. And it was like, what were they doing? Remember the commercials? It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
Yes, of course.
Now, like that would never happen. Everyone knows. People are like, you know, almost putting their kids in these little bubbles and trying to make everything great and perfect. And I have that desire sometimes. Even there was another funny one that was like, parents never took their kids on this many vacations, did this much for them, this many nights out to dinner. Like our world is just trending more and more towards how can you make their lives so perfect? But like, what's the cost benefit there? Like the huge cost is, what if my kids don't know how to deal with anything going wrong? What if I call about every test they don't get a perfect score on and figure out a way to get them a couple extra points? And I make sure that like every dinner, every meal is perfect, that, you know, everything is cut for them, that every outfit is laid out, that every ride is taken care of, that there's never like a one. Do you remember like waiting outside and your parents being 10 minutes late? Like that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah,
but then
it doesn't.
know happens. If everything is so good, that there's never a moment of like, oh, what's happening? They're not even going to be excited for the great stuff.
So how are you wading through that as a parent right now? Because, you know, I know, in knowing you, like I said, like, I feel like we spent enough time together and had enough conversation that I could see you operating very intentionally to not be that way. But I think it can be really hard if you have social circles and friends where like, that's what the moms are talking about. And like really trying to focus on making sure everything's great for their kids, like social pressure of somebody being the best athlete, best student. A lot of that kind of trickles into, I think, what the influence is behind making sure that everything is perfect. But that's really interesting that you make that comparison, because you're so right. Like it, and even I thought, like, I'm sitting here saying that I felt like my parents really tried to make things so perfect for me that I wasn't prepared when something didn't go the way I wanted to. I can't imagine now today, because relative to the actions you're describing, like there were definitely things that my mom wasn't like all over and wanted me to just kind of figure out myself. Right. So how are you navigating that, having 9-year-old kids?
Tell you what, I don't know if I'm doing a great job. I don't know if anyone's doing a great job, especially with the last 2 years. My kids were 7 when the COVID pandemic situation, you know, when it all kind of started and locked things down. They were moving towards that age of like first tastes of freedom. And now all of a sudden they were like suction cup to us, like little octopus. You know, like it. So I don't know. I guess just sort of holding space for them to be themselves and trying to like help them navigate and figure out what that means and who they are. And even like as a parent, what does like a phone look like or an iPad as a part of like their social interaction? Because it's had to be. How do we make sure that they're aware of people with less than them? How do we make sure that they know where they fall in terms of like, no, those people have more than you? Like I've had super funny conversations. The town that I live in is definitely like affluent. And I remember one day getting into my car with a couple other people and they're like, oh, how do you close your trunk? And I was like, with your hands, right? Like realizing where you're like living sort of and how your kids are growing up and wanting them to have a sense of like what it means to be grounded and not expecting that everything is going to be best of the best, top of the line. Oh, can we make sure that you have like a butler and a concierge everywhere that you're going? Like, it's just a really weird world right now. And I have a good friend who said, you know, no one has the golden ticket right now. And that was a huge sigh of relief for me because I was like, good, I'm glad that that's true. Because I know I don't have it. Like I'm with everyone else in the factory, Willy Wonka, ripping the chocolate bars opening, hoping that you find something because I don't know. I don't even know what good parenting, like, God bless the person who writes the book that becomes the bestseller on how to be like a good parent after a pandemic. And I'm sure someone will, because it's not easy. It's not even easy to know like play date, quote unquote play dates, which I swore when I had my kids, I wouldn't use that word because no one called it that when I was little. It's like, everyone feels differently. Everyone's families have different comfort levels with regard to COVID still. Like there's so many layers and things to think about. It's like things that used to be, worth considering are now like obstacles and boundaries in terms of relationships. And I was talking the other day about, I'm married, but people who are dating, I'm like, how do you even do that with like the apps and then meeting someone? And like, I can't even imagine the conversation. It's such a different world in such a short amount of time. Have we ever seen a dynamic change through a period of stagnation, but like such a quick period?
So quick, right? Like for as much as we are getting to the point of like half kidding, but also like, holy shit, and saying, look at what happened was originally a 2-week mandate. We are bumping up against a 2-year mark and how different our world has been and still is in a lot of places. Like that's actually such a short period of time that things have just done a total 360. And it's interesting what you say about like the age of your kids. And I mean, like even thinking about it and the fact of them jumping from 7 to 9, like it sounds like a long time, but it's so fast. And I feel like everyone who has children always says that like in raising kids, you really realize how fast time goes by. But, like to your point of being totally frank, like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. Couple questions. First, did your kids have, how like long of a period did your kids do like Zoom school and all that sort of stuff? Like, were they virtual for a while? Like, what did that look like in the context of your life? Just so we can kind of give everybody like the picture of like what you were experiencing, because it was different depending on where you lived.
Oh yeah. Mine is kind of funny because March 8th, 2020 had a humongous St. Patrick's Day parade. Like people pouring onto the streets. We have like 3 cute little towny restaurant bars. Like I was on a trolley. My kids were on a different float. People are throwing candy. People are sharing cups, water bottles. So that was March 8th. Now I was supposed to have a yoga event. I run the New Jersey Yoga Collective Bible Yoga Festival up and down in Asbury Park. Shout out March 20th if anyone wants to come. Coming up. But I was supposed to have an event at a place called Porta in Asbury Park on
love their pizza
12th or 14th, one of those 2 days. And I remember do it, and we're getting all these, articles, Twitter, news, whatever, and you're seeing things happening and stuff's going to shut down. People are starting to freak out. It was definitely getting really crazy. The conversations, right? It was like frenetic at that point. And I remember I had probably like 60 or 70 people signed up for this event, and I'm getting all these emails and texts and questions. And I decided the day before I spoke to the people who were a part of it, I was like, I think we have to pull the plug. I don't think we can do this. I'm going to have to refund everyone's money. And people then were sending me like the angriest message. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you gave in. Whatever it was, that same day that I made the decision, not more than 2 hours later, Disney World closed. And I remember being like, okay, I did the right thing. Like if Disney World closed, my little yoga event probably shouldn't be happening. And all I kept thinking was like, I don't want to be this super spreader event before we even knew the term super spreader, where all these people would potentially get sick. Like that was making me, I couldn't even sleep.
You were carrying that. Yeah.
So I remember canceling that event. School all of a sudden the next week was done for the kids. They were home. They didn't even have the Zoom stuff set up. It wasn't even an option. I don't even remember what they did those first couple of weeks. Maybe we all just picked up the books and they like would send you kind of like a work to go through at home. But we all thought it was going to be 2 weeks. Like everyone could do.
To my point. Yeah.
You could do absolutely anything in the entire world for 2 weeks. And then as that expanded and we learned that it wasn't going to be 2 weeks, that's when Zoom started to come into the picture for the kids, or really Google Meetings, I think they used.
Yeah.
And my kids were home. I think they were home that entire year because it was just March until
June. Yeah.
And I think they gave them off like the snow days at the end. But we do live at the Jersey Shore. Summer came and it was like COVID was around, of course, and we were all aware, but it was like it took a break because people went to the beach and you had a lot more freedom because the weather was nice. August hits, and I remember just the idea of September looming in the distance, like this beast that was going to come and get us, because we did not know what was going to happen with the schools. The decisions were left, right, sideways, up and down. My kids were home, but not nearly as long as other people. I want to say we were hybrid by October with going in a few days. They were in half days the whole week, maybe by the beginning of the next semester. And then my kids were fully back, at some point during that third grade year. Towards the end, they were able to be there, I think, for the full day. And then this year, the masks are super challenging. I've definitely seen a shift. I've seen for my son. My daughter's very social and it doesn't seem to bother her as much. I also think every teacher is different. Her teacher seems to give praise and more opportunities, but it's been a challenge, but they have been back. We're very lucky, blessed. The school system that we're in has like an outdoor classroom and a lot of like special things that the kids are able to take advantage of and enjoy. But, you layer on as a person who, I have friends that work full-time jobs. I have friends that are stay-at-home moms. And then I'm kind of like in the mush of the middle, that I don't work like a classic 9-to-5 job, but I do a lot of hours of doing a lot of things. And some weeks are crazy busy and some weeks could be a lot less busy. And I do work for my parents. So like it just doesn't look the same. But no matter what you do, you're always judging yourself from the minute you have kids, right? Like if you're a working mom, you're not with your kids enough in your mind. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you gave up your career and like maybe what was like the example that you thought you were going to set and how it's different now. And that's in your mind. And if you're like me, you're like, oh my God, I'm always doing everything 65%. I'm never 100%. And like, what does that do to your mind? Now, all of a sudden the kids are home. I'm not a teacher. Like, I'm not good at that. I was super good at school. So to me, explaining things, I'm like, wait, why?
Like, why aren't you getting it? Yeah.
Yeah. Like the reason I think I'm a good yoga teacher is that I'm not naturally flexible. And I'm not naturally like super strong. So a lot of the things that I've learned how to do, I've really had to be a great student.
Sure.
And a great student can be a great teacher, but when it comes super easy, right? Like if your back bend is like, ooh, it's almost hard to look at someone or to help someone who's struggling and be like, this is where you could, I don't want to say cheat a little, but like, this is where you could learn to compensate. This is where you could learn to change something, move your wrists a little bit, press through your form a little differently. And like, let's see what happens. So for me, yoga didn't come easily, which I think allows me to be a great teacher. School academics did come really easy. And I was a terrible teacher for my children. My husband was much better with them than I was the entire period of it.
And in looking back on it, like as I love that you brought up the fact that like all of your friends had different experiences, especially based on like, were they working full time? What did their schedules look like? And even regardless, it's just like, you're playing this additional role in your kids' lives that like, I know you were joking about it, but like that they were suctioned to you for a while. Like your kids need that space just as much as you need that space. Like that's how they're going to grow. That's how they are hopefully going to be able to navigate some of the not so perfect things. Because when mom or dad isn't there and certain things are going on in school, like that puts them in those situations to be able to figure shit out and learn how to adapt. Right. So if you could, go back and tell yourself something from maybe not in the first 2 weeks, because there was still a lot of that uncertainty, but like, as you really got into like May and you knew that this was the reality for the rest of the school year, like, is there advice that you would have given yourself if you had to do it all over again? Were you being really hard on yourself at that time? Because I think a lot of moms were like, I have a lot of moms that I've worked with who, especially with them having full-time jobs in particular, where their jobs then went virtual, it was really difficult because there was no separation in the house to the point where like, if their kid needed help getting onto the computer, they were like, well, I'm also in a meeting too. And there was just like, frankly, burnout from that. Right. I know you didn't necessarily experience that because of the type of work that you do, but is there something that you feel like you wish you could have done differently, or like maybe something, make it positive that you're really happy about, like about having that time with your kids?
Yeah, I'm gonna say overall, I was able to enjoy a lot of the time because I wasn't going through some of the hardships that other people were. Like, we didn't lose a close family member, not goodness. But like, we didn't have to shoulder a lot of the sadness that other people did. My kids are, lucky, blessed to be atypical learners. No, not atypical, typical learners, right? Like, they're just like, they don't have a lot of challenges beyond laziness. So I can push them a little bit. I can say, like, sit down and do this. I'm sure there's a million different places where I drop the ball. I think a huge benefit for them, though, is my husband, he used to leave at 6:00 in the morning. He would get home at 7:30 at night. They didn't really get to spend as much time with him. It's been 2 years where they've had the opportunity to spend a ton of time with him. So that's been a gift, to the point that they like rely on him for certain things more than me. And every so often I'm like, oh, yikes, I've been replaced. But like, it's so good because how many kids ever really get to have their dads home a lot? Like, I that's normal at all for the vast majority of families, probably like 95% of families.
It's the biggest thing I've heard out of this as a huge silver lining for people, like, for lack of a better word, right? Because like, I think about my own childhood, and my dad had to do what he did to provide the life that he did for us. And I'm so grateful. And like, his work ethic is such a driver behind why I choose to do a lot of the things that I do. But there's definitely, like, I can't even picture what it would have been like for him to be home all day. Like, I don't have a concept of that in my head at all.
Right. Like cooking breakfast or like doing.
It's like funny to think about that to me. Like, it's a joke in our house that that's not his thing. And like, it's fine because that's just how our family was, and like, whatever. Right. But like, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's been a very interesting time period, but like, none of us chose it and all of us were stuck with it. So to even go back and say like what I would do, I don't even know what I would do differently because we never knew what was coming. Right. Like, really a space of unknown. Some of the good things, I think, like for myself, I was way into like the hustle and grind, just constantly moving, constantly needing to do the next best thing, constantly questioning if I was doing the right thing, just like this, right, hamster on the wheel. That forced pause is probably never a bad thing. Although I do know so many people lost money, lost opportunities. So I would never wish it again to happen to anyone. But we were all collectively forced to stop, which in that, for me, I know there was a gift of being able to like reset and refocus.
And how much do you think, when I think of your perspective, and maybe I'm stereotyping a little bit, but I kind of want to hear your take on this, like, of having that very open-minded, accepting things are as they come. How much of that do you think is influenced by yoga? And the reason why I'm asking that is because, and maybe I'm biased since I've taken your classes and I know the type of messaging that you weave into your practice for your students has a lot to do with like accepting things as they are, right? Like, even accepting your flexibility is going to be different every single day. Like, acknowledging like, oh, things feel tighter in these places, in that place, like whatever it is. Or even in listening to, I've recorded you giving a meditation before. And I feel like that's a theme of how you operate. And I would be hard pressed to assume that doesn't trickle into other areas of your life. Like, have you really thought about that before? Or do you think that that's what you need and your yoga practice gives you the space to do it?
Well, let me start out by saying I come from a mindset in yoga that yoga doesn't change you. Yoga doesn't heal you. Yoga doesn't fix you. Yoga is not medicine. Yoga is not therapy. Like, I just don't believe those things. I believe that yoga is a tool for probably a lot of things. And if I sat here, I could probably name more than these three, but for me, the biggest ones are kindness, compassion, and then the ability to just like be aware, to notice, right? So I don't think yoga is about love, because love to me is like a firework. It bursts. I love you. I love you. I love you. But like, if we felt that way, love, 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 love 24/7, it would be so exhausting, right? Like, the basic practice is kindness. So that like, I might not love you at all. I might actually not be a fan of yours, but I can always have kindness as my foundation in our interactions. I can choose to not spend a lot of time with you. I can decide that you sort of fit into my life and I fit into yours in a way that's like maybe necessary, right? If we're parents that know each other, or
Sure.
or we're in the same family somehow, in-law, whatever, right? Like, but I can always have kindness. I can always have kindness in my heart and in my mind when I'm listening to you, when I'm hearing your ideas, when I'm experiencing your perspective. And I can have compassion as well for the fact that like you're in a different chapter of your life. You've had different experiences than me. And it's not up to me to push those experiences and ideas through like the lens of my life. It's about me taking a step back and listening and being like, hey, that's Krysta's experience, right? Like you came from a family I don't know about. You went to a school that I don't know about. Your friends treated you a certain way that I might not know about. So all of this, whatever the conversation is, good, bad, or otherwise, is coming from that, right? It's coming with like little drips and drags from all that.
Yeah.
So my mind and heart, I have kindness and compassion, not just for like the words and how they're hitting me, but for like the person and the life they had to live that got them to a place where they're saying and feeling that way. So I'm always open to conversation and dialogue. And I think that's a huge thing that yoga teaches. And then when I say awareness, and I talk about this all the time in my classes, the dream in yoga is not the perfect pose. It's not the perfect om. It's not meditating and levitating and becoming a guru. It's none of that. It's about being able to move through your life with, in a sense, like a little bit of a detachedness. And I don't mean like detached in the sense of snobby or like not caring.
Yeah.
That not everything's about you, right? That you're able to be aware and to acknowledge and to notice without judging and overanalyzing. And you're able to walk away from a conversation and like take the learning without taking all the other crap that we tend to like throw in this metaphorical backpack and then like bring with us into the next situation, right? Like think about the worst relationships in your life. Throw it in. You're wearing that. It's closing you off to like whatever's next, as opposed to being like, hey, that was terrible. I allowed myself to be taken advantage of, this, that, I didn't speak up for myself. I didn't allow myself to be totally authentic or honest, but I did learn these 3 things. And I now am making a decision to be super strong in a healthy boundary. That's like the acknowledging, that's the noticing, and that's the being able to move on with, I guess, like a clear conscience and an open mind and an open heart. So you don't get closed off. It's so easy in this life to get closed off, to get shut down, to get walled up, right? To say like, I've suffered traumas, life has broken me. I have a good friend who always says, like, she puts it this way, her name's Lockie. She's like, you're not broken. She's like, I don't want people to say that they're broken, because the idea of broken, now it has to be like, well, how do we fix this?
We have to fix something, right?
Not something not someone that needs to be fixed. Like, but you need to learn or you're never going to feel better. You have to keep learning or you're never going to feel better.
I really appreciate that. And I love that, because I don't know if that I've ever shared this with you just in the conversations that we've had. Like a big reason behind my name of the Fix, for both like the fitness fix for my nutrition coaching business and this podcast, actually has a lot to do with that. And it was a little bit of like one of those double entendre things, because it's like, get your fix, like, you need something. But also like this idea that on my website, when you open it, it says diet culture is broken. Not you, the person. Like, let's fix it together, as in like, let's fix the approach, not you. Like, it has a really, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. Also, because I've definitely operated in the place that like, I've gotten super closed off, and frankly, it didn't serve me. I probably had to go through that to be able to realize how poorly that was serving me. So I don't regret it for a second. It sucked in the moment, right? But it was also my own doing. So, and you describing that proverbial backpack, like I can picture and like feel what that weight was like, because I've totally been there. And I fully agree with you. Like it's not going to help you get to wherever it is you're, not that you even want to go, but like where you're intended to go, right? Like how can you, if you are operating always from this really closed off place, how can you accept what you're supposed to have in life, or like what is meant for you in life? Because you're not going to let it in.
You're not even going to know. It's going to come. Be cynical about it. You're going to be like, that for me, because my life is just a series of screw ups. Mm-hmm. And operating from that place is just going to make you so bitter and angry. And I do I do think that's the opposite of yoga. Like that bitterness to me would be the opposite of yoga. The opposite of yoga is not strong, tough fitness or like not being peaceful, being a warrior. Like if anything, there's warrior poses in yoga. I think yoga teaches us to soften in certain ways, to put up healthy boundaries in certain ways, and to ultimately understand, you know, like this is my best self. I'm my best self when these things are happening. These things are not always going to be happening, but what are the tools in my toolbox that can keep me fortified and strong when life does get hard?
Totally. 100%. And that's really why I even asked you the question in the first place, right? Like how has yoga influenced a lot of your thought processes, even just like the way you approach parenting? And maybe it's not even specific to yoga because it's just how you live. Like it's just who Bridget is, right? To go all the way back to that very original question.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that. And it's funny, Krysta and I did a boxing class together this past weekend. And I found myself breathing in that boxing class the way that I breathe in yoga. And I definitely had like a yogic moment in a very different sort of fitness modality. And I think the longer you do yoga, you find those moments. You find them while you're taking a walk. You find them when you're able to sit on the beach and just like appreciate the waves rolling in. It's everywhere if you look for it.
Yeah, that's really cool that you had that. And like, I also think it's really cool because you had that experience, but I was standing right next to you. I had a totally different experience in that class, right? And I think there's something really special about that. And that's actually something I've always loved about group fitness in particular. And I'm sure you can relate to that, having been a yoga teacher for as long as you have too, right? Like it's one of the, for me, like I never was really interested in personal training. Like the only thing I love to do in a one-on-one capacity is nutrition coaching because it has to be individualized. And I live for that. But there was a point, especially during COVID, where I thought like, should I transition into this? Because it's something I can do online. And I had a couple of people I did it with more of as like, I had an existing relationship. I had trained them in person in the past. Like, I want to do this for you. But frankly, it wasn't filling my cup at all. And I think when I think about why, the first answer I always give has a lot to do with like the energy of a lot of people being in the room and what it's like to kind of lead that group. Because I get that energy back and that does really fill my cup. But I think the second piece is the fact that like I can teach that class and know that everyone else is every single person in there is going to walk away with like a different feeling about it. And there's something about that to me that's just like very unique. And I don't think you can mimic or recreate in any other kind of environment, and definitely not in a one-on-one sort of way. Like I love that, like you had this yogic moment in that boxing class. Meanwhile, I'm over there and I'm like, I was kind of pissed about something. And I was like, I'm just going to like punch this shit out here and have a good time and like laugh and whatnot. Yet we were doing the same thing.
And you're also dealing with in that class. Like I remember getting pulled out of the room because something was happening with like sound or video somewhere else. And we all really do have a different, you know, I'll say even back in the day, I remember people were like, oh, no cell phones in the room, no speaking in the yoga room, blah, blah. The longer I've been teaching and the more things that happen in your own life, I'm like, well, maybe that woman needs her phone because maybe her kid wasn't feeling great and she's worried the school's going to call, or maybe her parent is in the hospital, but she just really needed to try to get a practice in. Or, you know, that person is wearing shoes. And I'm like, I'm not going to get upset about it. Maybe it's the first time I ever came into a yoga room, or like these two women are having a conversation, and that's amazing because like they came to yoga together. Like the older I get and the more I do this, the less I feel like there are rules around anything or one set experience that needs to happen for everyone. It's just about like, if you're there, you're showing up and you're open-minded to whatever it is, I think you're going to enjoy, whether it's boxing or strength or, you know, hit or like there's something for everyone if you let yourself have that.
Yeah. And I would also even argue that to your point about this detachment, getting bothered by, I think this comes with like, for anybody who's listening to this, if you're a newer instructor, I fully respect that, like those types of things of like someone being on their phone or talking to the person next to you, or like just dealing with the challenge of having a newbie in your class for the first time, that can throw you off your game. I've been there. I know Bridget has been there. We could tell you 1,600 stories about what that's been like. However, I think the evolution and the maturity of what you just described, Bridget, goes back to your point earlier about living from that sense of detachment. Because frankly, like I hear that and I think now, and it's taken me 5-6 years of teaching to like nod my head in agreement with you. is if I'm bothered by like someone having their phone, that's like almost like a me problem a little bit, right? Because like I'm really internalizing that from like my sense of self and my ego in the way that like I'm saying, well, I'm teaching such a great class. Like, why isn't this person paying attention to me? I think deep rooted, that's actually what it has to do with. But we try to play it off like, oh, you're disturbing the other people. I don't really think that's it. I think it's like a you thing.
Definitely. It's a lesson of like, okay, like chocolate chip cookies are amazing, right? Like the vast majority of people in this world would be like, I would eat a chocolate chip cookie right now. Mm-hmm. That said, there's going to be someone out there who's allergic to chocolate. There's going to be
doesn't like chocolate,
who just doesn't like the taste. You could be the best of the best in the universe. You could have just like taught a class that Olympians would applaud, and like you don't even know, but there's always someone out there, right? Like I'm not for everyone. And that's like a hard pill to swallow, because like, listen, anyone who goes into anything where you're putting yourself on a stage, big or small, and teaching class is like a stage where you're a people pleaser in some way. You like that little bit of like limelight. You like being front. You like being a leader. And I think acknowledging that is important. But if you're going to put yourself out there, there's going to be people that do not like you. And I struggle with that still. If you ask the close people in my life, they would be like, that is my biggest fears, right? Are being like letting people down and being embarrassed. Like those would be my two biggest fears in the entire world. And so many of my decisions that I make, especially wrong decisions, come from those two places. So, you know, how do you get past that? It is this like healthy detachment. And I mean, I have to think about it every day. I have to remind myself of it every single day.
Yeah. And I think just in the environment of us, you know, I obviously in the past almost 2 years now have been working on starting my own business, and everything being new and feeling like a lot of pressure and feeling like you got to do everything yourself. And like, you don't know what's coming every single day. So you feel like everything's coming at you from all sides all the time. And it can be hard to kind of separate that. Like I always give that advice to new instructors. Like when you walk in the room, you got to like put some of your shit off to the side, right? Because you're there to help that other person who may really need you, because they also have a ton of shit, to just have a good experience, the best experience you could deliver in that class. And then I think we even see the same thing with helping build a new athletic facility, and like creating a concept that like some days we just don't know what we're doing, and we have to be like okay with that. And that detachment practice can also you can be strengthened in just like being okay with whatever comes by having that sort of healthy detachment too. Because otherwise, like, it just feels like everything is like such an emergency, and like you feel like you're constantly chasing something and you don't know what, because you don't know like what is the best, what's going to be perfect, what is it going to take, and you won't get through it otherwise.
I think that's where the open-mindedness comes into. Like, it's taken me time to get to this place, but I feel so good being in it, where I truly never care if my idea is the best. Like, if my idea is a part of the mush pile that gets us to something great, that's all I care about. And like, Krysta's been in so many conversations with me where I'll be like 2 minutes into like advocating for what I think, and then I'll be like, I actually don't care. And she'll be like, what? And I'll be like, I don't know. It just like hit me in this moment. Like, there's a better idea. Like, I don't even care about anything I just said. And you probably think I'm crazy, but that's like a big part of my process of realizing like it's happened to me in so many different places where I just have to have this like check-in moment of like, this doesn't matter. In the big, the placement of that vendor table is not going to change anything substantial for the people I love, the things that I truly care about, or my personal barometer for success, right? Yeah. Why am I fighting? Why am I like, I don't remember what the term is, but like dying on the hill or standing on why am I making this the place where I'm like, that's it. Like, this has to be. So rarely in life does it have to be. There's probably like 5 things in a year that any of us care that much about, that it needs to be like the way we truly want it to be.
What guidance would you give to somebody to be able to help them develop that perspective? Because I totally agree with you. Like, I think I've I've definitely been there, and it's something I have to work towards on a regular basis to be like, okay, step back from this for a second. And I don't want to make it out to anybody listening, be like, think that this is like a super easy thing to accomplish. So let's give that listener who may be sitting here being like, oh shit, like that's me. Like I really, really like let certain things like take them to heart, ruin my day, whatever you want to say about it. What can they do to get through that? Like what worked for you?
So for me, it's two things. It's two different questions. Like the first question is always, what's the ultimate goal? And a lot of times when you answer that question, it clarifies it for you.
Everything.
Really.
Yeah.
Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? What am I trying to accomplish as a part of this? Whatever it is. And a lot of times that answer is going to help you like let go of some of the nitty gritty. And then one of my favorites, it's actually from a book by Danielle LaPorte. It's called The Desire Map. And it's this question of, how do you want to feel? Not what do you want to do? Not where do you have to be? Not, like what's the expectation? Just like in this moment, in this relationship, in this day, how do I want to feel? So if my answer today is that I want to feel like super prepared, I want to feel engaged, and I want to feel like I'm a part of a team, why don't I make decisions that move me towards those feelings as opposed to feeling like alienated or like that I have to be right? Think about like words where you land on days when you don't feel great. You would have never chosen those words. Like the nights when you go having that like, oh shit conversation in your own head. No one chooses that. No one wakes up, let me piss people off today, be a bitch, and then ultimately like go to bed angry. No one wakes up in the morning and thinks those thoughts. So if you feel any of that happening and you can control it for yourself, stop, right? And if you feel from external forces, a lot of it is like a bravery of going to a person, just being like, and when I need to speak with someone, when I need to, like, it's never, I think you did this, or I did this, or it should have been this way. It's more just like, hey, I feel like something's off between us. What's going on? Right. And just opening a door for a conversation. It never should be when you accuse someone, you're already putting yourself in a bad spot. You're putting them up against the ropes. You're putting yourself in this adversarial position. And like, who does that ever help?
Nobody. Yeah. And, going back to the whole parenting aspect of all this, I have to know, how do you, being that your kids are only 9, it is important that they start to get a taste, like for some of this perspective, right? But how do you do that, being that they're only 9 years old? Like, how does this show up on a regular basis in your role as a mom?
With regard to their emotions, I think a lot of it is asking super open-ended questions, like staying away from the yes, no answers, going the step further when it is like, how was your day? Fine. Okay, well, like, tell me something that happened during your day. Oh, well, how did you feel about that? Right? Like allowing the word feel to come in more often, and then like hopefully giving them the tools to answer that question, being like, great, I'm glad that you felt good, but were you nervous? Were you excited? Blah, blah, blah. Like giving them an opportunity to think about their feelings as something big, because feelings should be big. And I think that so many of us were taught growing up, or I know I was, right? Like, you don't want to burden other people with how you feel. Like, I want my kids to burden me with how they feel. I want to know how they feel. I want them to have big feelings. I want them to be able to follow their feelings and to understand, when something is hurting them, when someone is upsetting them. And then also when someone is, I ask my daughter all the time. So like, out of all your friends, like, who do you feel like you can really trust a lot? Oh, well, what do you mean? Well, like, if you had a secret, who would be someone that you would be able to talk to? Okay, like, why do you feel that way? Well, like, what makes you think that about her? Like, what happens in your relationship? And like, just helping them to identify positives and negatives that will hopefully carry them through life and help them to make better decisions, right? So we're not always doing the like hindsight is 20/20 thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you said something really important in terms of referencing their emotions and the positives and negatives. I feel like this is kind of having a moment, for lack of a better term, but this whole like conversation that's, at least from what I consume on social media, I don't know if you see it too, but like toxic positivity and like this role that parents unknowingly sometimes play in kind of getting their kids to push their feelings aside or push them down. I think it actually relates back to a little bit of that goal to make everything perfect. And I was listening to a podcast recently, and I feel like she's just been quoted with saying this a lot, but Maria Shriver, and talking about how she parents her kids, like she says one of the best things that you can say to your child, and having some of the conversations you're describing, Bridget, is 3 words: tell me more. Instead of what I think a lot of parents have tended to do over the years, and it's with good intention, and this is why it's hard, of phrases like, well, it's going to be okay. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I know this situation was tough, or like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And that's a really hard thing, because the person who's saying it's going to be fine, they have so much love in their heart for you and wanting to say that. But it goes back to giving them the ability to feel their emotions, and what you just said, and saying like, you grew up not wanting to burden anybody with your feelings. I think it's got to come from that a little bit.
Definitely. And I think the toxic positivity concept is a big issue. I think there's a big issue around for boys, that like, you can't, like, don't be like boyish, right? Like, what does that mean? And how can you soften, and like, not trying to force them into a box, not trying to force them into a trend. Like, my son doesn't love playing sports. My daughter loves playing sports. My husband and I, the way we grew up, we would have thought like our son would be a certain way and our daughter would be a certain way, because there was like very clear gender assignment experience that you were supposed to be good at. And it's like, the world is different now, right? Like, people are not as expected to do and to experience and but so how do we parent and make sure that we're supporting them and then giving them opportunities and not forcing them to do things that we think fit with what like a little boy or a little girl should do? There's a lot of those questions, and you are constantly having to have conversations about it. I think it's really good to have a strong support system of friends. And when I say strong support system of friends, I do not mean people that all think the same as you. I think one of the best things is to have like people that think really different than you. I have friends who are teachers and feel super differently about everything that's happened during the pandemic from other people I know who were full-time working moms in the city. And now all of a sudden it's like went from one. It's very important to have it all, to hear it all, and to not my voice to be the biggest voice in the conversation.
I think that's one of the biggest reasons I always love talking to you, because you sometimes like surprise me with what I expected you to say versus what you actually did. Right. Like, and I think you do a really great job, and I want to acknowledge you for that, because obviously I don't see you parent your kids on a regular basis. Like, I only see you when you're on your own. And I haven't had enough like interaction with them personally to have more of an opinion on that in any way. But even when you and I have more personal conversations when we're at work, like, sometimes I would assume that like, oh, if I say this to Bridget, like, I think she's probably going to say this back. But you are very curious and open, that you'll say something, you'll be like, well, what, have you thought about it that way? Or have you thought about this? And there's always a couple jokes in there too. Not that like everything we're talking about is super serious all the time, but it's just something I wanted to say, because I do really, really genuinely enjoy that about you. And anytime we have any kind of conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I would say, with me meeting you too, like when I first met you, I was like, oh, she's like super smart, super go-getter, blah, 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 which you are, all those things. And I actually remember feeling like a little intimidated by them, being like, oh God, here we go. Like, I'm like,
I thought you hated me the first time we met too, which I was going to start off the show by talking about this. Because as I was preparing for this conversation, I was thinking about like, well, how are we going to get into this and like give the backstory on how we know each other? And I'm like in the shower, just have my best thoughts in the shower. And I was like, I feel like I should tell the story. So now I'm going to tell it. The first time we met, I was literally like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to work with this woman, because she definitely does not like me. That was the first thing I thought.
That was the opposite, that I was like, oh my God, she's like, does everything. She's going to be so good at everything. I'm going to be like a total loser in this situation. Like, that was my perspective. I was like, oh boy, they're all going to ask me what I do. And I'm like 10 years older than her, and she's already done 10 more things than me. You come off serious. Like, I've had so many people that I'm good friends with say that they thought I was like so serious when they first met me.
But like you're honestly like a really big jokester too, because some of like the things that you say, I'm like, I like start cracking up, because I think it's also like the surprise, because the first time I met you, I thought you were super serious.
Yeah, I come off very serious, and I don't know why, and I don't even realize it. But I would say like the vast majority of people that I'm close with in my life, when they first meet me, are like, I thought you were so serious.
Yeah. And I also didn't even, to go back to the whole, like the different versions of yoga and how like just the yoga environment has changed so much. You don't even come off like what I think of when I think of like that stereotypical yogi. But now knowing your perspective on what you think of when you think of yoga, it makes perfect sense to me.
Well, and I came to yoga in college because all my friends were going to the gym and I didn't like doing the elliptical trainer. So like I wanted to go to the gym. So I just like went to a yoga class. Like it was not for any big fabulous reason. I got super into it then the year I took off between college and law school, but like mostly because I thought that it was like different. I like, there was never this big, I have to do yoga moment. It was more of this just like slow, but sort of beautiful snowballing towards something that really felt important in my life. Like I consider yoga a relationship the same way I consider my marriage or my kids or my friends or my parents, my siblings. Like it's another big relationship in my life. Like it's a relationship that I value. But when you think of like a relationship that you value, like I value our friendship, that doesn't mean that like I think you're a part of me and I'm a part of you. Like we're not like conjoined twins here.
Yeah.
It's a give and take, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel that way about not even just yoga, but like fitness. Like to me, in my body, that is a relationship. And it's one that I put a high value on. And I want to like spend time with it. And I almost want to like take myself on date nights by trying something different, right? Like it just matters to me in the same way that the people that I care the most about like matter to me.
That's really beautiful. I love that. I'm definitely stealing that for something like your fitness in your life is a relationship. I think that's super powerful. And I think that's something that just, if you're listening to this conversation and kind of like reflecting about what we're saying, or how does what you're saying relate back to you, your life, wherever you are in your fitness, your wellness journey, and even in your professional journey, like anything. I think that's a really unique way to then ask yourself, if this is a relationship and I respect this relationship, can maybe that outlook be the driver behind your decision to reframe your nutrition or work towards some kind of like fitness or wellness goal? Because I think so often, I know you would agree with this, everyone who operates from the place of like not liking their body and that being the reason that they want to change it. This is not a new concept. I know so many people who say this all the time. It's like, that's not going to work for you because like you're hating yourself into trying to love your body. And that it actually makes no sense. Right. But we all do it. We're all like looking again for something to fix. It goes back to that broken example. And I really feel like just flipping that language and flipping the switch and saying, that for you, yoga is a relationship. If you could say that about nutrition or your fitness in any kind of way, your wellness in any kind of way, I honestly feel like it would almost be easier to make some of the decisions that you're not making right now that you know you should be to get to the ultimate goal you're trying to achieve.
And like just thinking about it, if you were in a relationship, you would try new things, right? Like you wouldn't just watch TV, eat the exact same food, or maybe you would, but you'd be pretty damn bored. And it's like, maybe in certain times, like you're trying a new relationship, like you're trying a new relationship with nutrition. Maybe your past relationship sucked.
Yes.
Like you really need to break up. Maybe Krysta is like your nutrition relationship marriage counselor, and she's going to like help you get to the other side. Like,
I love that.
Right. Like if you are going to think about it that way, like stop judging it. Like you said, hating your body, that's hating a part of you. You don't hate your body. You hate the choices that you've been making in this relationship with your body.
Mm-hmm.
Choices.
Totally. I really love that. And I want to be respectful of your time because, I could talk to you forever since we have like hour-long meetings that we could have done in like 15 minutes because we love to talk so much, but very true story. But I so appreciate you doing this. And this was a really powerful and beautiful conversation. And I'm just so grateful that we have had the opportunity to meet and are only honestly just getting started and all of the cool things that we're going to have the chance to do and build together. So I think that's super exciting as we look ahead to the next couple of months and years and beyond. So thank you for that. And before I let you go, we're going to do a quick little lightning round. So just like fun questions to finish it off. They're going to be about any random thing that pops into my head.
Sounds good. And thank you so much. This has been awesome. And yes,
of course. Okay. So I know you're a big Peloton girl. I know you're a huge fan of Cody Rigsby. Like that's your go-to guy. I want to know if you could only do this. Tell me if this is too hard of a question to answer. We could pick something else, but I want to make it a Peloton question. If you can only take like one ride of his for the rest of your life, like whether that's like a certain theme or a playlist or something, is there one that just like really pops out for you? If you were stuck and that was like the only Peloton ride you could do.
It's a one ride. It's not like a series because he does a series called XOXO Cody.
We could do a series. Okay. What's it? Tell me about it.
Well, because he answers questions in the middle, which I love. Like,
that's so fun.
Take a break and he answers questions. But I will say my favorite Peloton ride of all time is actually when they do the all for one and all the different teachers get up, because I think you would never get bored.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that to me yesterday, actually. I thought that was a really cool concept. I love it. It's like a little like tag team of different riders and instructors leading the class. I think that's really cool.
Right. And I guess that's like you would just never get bored. You'd be like, oh, I forgot. Oh, great.
Cool. All right. If you take yourself back to like when you were first going through your yoga teacher training, is there anything that stands out in your mind that like maybe was kind of like something that you thought to be true, but now 11 years later after teaching yoga, you look at that idea and you're like, wow, Bridget, that was so silly.
Yes. There's a concept in yoga that is the whole idea of like, so there's yamas and niyamas, which are like ethical and moral tenets that are you in your lifestyle. And one of them is the idea of non-stealing. And I remember my training being like, all right, well, so I'm not going to like go into CVS and take gum, check. But as years have gone on and life has gone on, I've realized that one of the biggest things that we steal from ourselves and from each other is time. And I think if I could go back and kind of highlight that for myself and even for other people in the room and for students, understand how valuable your time is, understand how valuable someone else's time is. If you go out to dinner with a friend, like don't text the entire meal. If you are sitting down for a conversation, be a part of that conversation. I know we all need to multitask. It's a necessity of life, but when you have moments that you can really make your time quality, go for that, because stealing time from someone else or from yourself is something you'll never, ever, ever get back. You can always make more money. There's so many things in life that you could do more of, but time you can't get back. And I didn't understand the idea of non-stealing as it relates to time when I was in my 20s. And it's something that I've really come to understand and value and try to put like a high importance on.
I love that so much because I think it's a trap I personally get caught up in a lot with being really busy, right? It's like, it really tests your ability to be present with certain things. And I have to say, that's actually why I love podcasting so much, because I literally couldn't, if I tried, be on my phone right now. I mean, I could, but I'd be totally rude to the person that I was recording with, right? And it's caught on camera. So yeah. It's just something like, and I'm like sitting here thinking about what you're saying and just smiling so big on a day where this is already my second podcast recording of the day. And because I'm so present with the people that I'm talking to, I feel such satisfaction off of doing this. It is very time consuming if we want to tie it back to time, but it's one of the most rewarding things that I do. And I know that's why. Like I've actually said that more than once on this show. And even in talking to other people who ask me like, why do you like podcasting? Why do you like doing that? Like that's one of the biggest components of it. And it's just really unique in a world where we're so easily distracted by so many things.
And I bet on the days that you do your podcast, you probably sleep really well because
I do. Yeah.
Yoga is a lot about presence, right? Like trying to be completely present in the room. And I mean this in a positive way. Being very present, presence is exhausting. When you are fully present in the moment, you sleep really well at night. You life very fully. And you're not questioning or upset or going back at the end of that day. You're able to put your head on the pillow and go to sleep because you were in it. You weren't half in it. You were completely in it.
It's so, so, so true. And I totally didn't make this part a lightning round question. Sorry. I just had to interject with that because I really, really identify with what you said. But I'm going to do one more question and it might be a little bit of a longer one too. And that's totally okay. If you, thinking back of everything we've talked about so far and somebody's listening through to this whole thing all the way to the end, but maybe they're only half listening. Maybe they weren't that present. If you could just like get them to perk up their ears right now and have one thing that you leave them with from everything we've talked about, like what would that piece of advice be?
Don't be afraid to quit, right? Like if we were going to go all the way back to law school, if we were going to go through what I was saying earlier about decisions in your life, and sometimes we do make the wrong ones, and don't even think about it necessarily as quitting. I would say maybe like, don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to pivot.
Love it.
If it's not working for you and you've given it like the old college try, right? Like you gave it your best, you can let go. Like yoga, you'll hear it. Teachers will tell you, inhale, let, exhale, go. Sometimes you need to let go. Sometimes you need to quit. Sometimes you need to pivot. Sometimes you need to be afraid. Sometimes you need to fall down. But all of those experiences end up being, I think, the biggest building blocks to where you really ultimately want to be and probably need to be, if you allow yourself the grace and the compassion and the kindness, right?
Mm-hmm.
The compassion and kindness to do that the same way you would for someone you love, the same way you would for a little kid. You'd be like, that's okay. You tried your hardest. Like that was more than enough. You don't have to keep doing this. Figuring out how to show that to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, in thinking about like how I got into yoga, because you asked me, or you made me think of this when you were making the comment about like not wanting to push yoga on someone else or having no judgment if someone says that they don't like yoga. I was always somebody like in and out of a yoga practice. Like I liked it and I appreciated it for what it was. But I will say that in 2021 was when I really was like, all right, I'm just going to like try this again. Like I enjoyed it sometimes, but I want to keep a little more of an open mind. And it's kind of interesting because I love it now. And I don't make enough time to do it, but I really, really love it. And I have a very different relationship with it than I did even 2-3 years ago, because I was always like weightlifting, barbells, powerlifting only, cardio, like every workout I need to be totally dead on the floor or didn't count sort of deal. And that's so not what I experience in doing yoga. It's also not what I look for when I do yoga. And that's on purpose because I've grown and learned a lot about what I need to get for my fitness. But I also think that it's kind of perfect for me, what you just said, because I really have a different appreciation for yoga now because I re-explored it in a season of like pivot. That was all I was doing for 24 months straight. And now I really, really enjoy it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So just thought I would share because I don't think I've ever really told you that. But
love it.
Thank you again, Bridget, for your time. This has been such a fun conversation. Really, like I've gotten so much out of this. I'm sitting here at the end taking notes and like, what do I want to highlight for the clips on social media? And it's going to be kind of hard to pick because this was an episode filled with tons of gems. So as the very, very, very last question, we want to make sure that anybody who wants to follow up with you, reach out to you, find you somewhere, maybe give us a little plug about your yoga event that's coming, because I know we mentioned it super briefly at the beginning of the conversation, but for any local listeners who might be in the Asbury area, talk to us about all that and tell us where we can follow you on social media.
Sure. You can find me on Instagram, Bridget, Bridget, Riepl. It's Riepl, but we pronounce it like a ripple in the water. I am the founder of the New Jersey Yoga Collective. So that's the NJ Yoga Collective on Instagram, where you would find a ton of information about the Vibe Yoga Festival. It happened in 2018, 2019, had to be paused for 2020 and 2021. So it is coming back in 2022 in Asbury Park. If you're local, I'm sure you know the Asbury Lanes. That's where the main stage yoga classes are going to happen. And we were able to partner up with the Asbury Bazaar this year. So they're going to have this awesome marketplace loaded with local artisans and kind of like health and wellness focused vendors and food. So it's a full day experience. I would love to see anyone who's local come check it out. You could find our webpage at spyballyogafestival.com. But if you connect with me on Instagram, it's obviously link in bio, all the things connected in all the places. I would love it. I would appreciate to see anyone there. I'm teaching that morning at 9 a.m. bright and early. So if you want to kick off a chilly Sunday in March, unless it ends up being beautiful, which can always happen in New Jersey, you never know.
That's very true.
Very true. You're more than welcome. I'd love to see anyone there. And please connect with me. If anything in this spoke to you, you can send me a message. I'm very readily available.
Love it. Well, I have a feeling, I didn't know that the event was canceled 2 years in a row. So I feel like all the more reason it's going to come back and like be bigger and stronger and better than ever. So that's really cool. I'm just anticipating that there will be a lot of energy there that day. And I definitely want to come regardless of the temperature. We'll layer up and we'll be good to go. Definitely. So for everybody who's listened today, thank you so much.
Indoors. I just meant like the walk from your car.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. For everybody who listened today, thank you guys so much for joining. As always, the show wouldn't be possible if anybody didn't tune into it and keep listening week after week. So I can't express enough gratitude to all of you guys for how fun it is to show up and have these conversations every single week, and hopefully continue to spread really positive messages like the one that Bridget so kindly shared with us today in talking through her story and her journey. If you guys need anything ever, I'm going to echo all of Bridget's sentiments as I do every single week. Reach out to me. I love hearing from you. I want to know what you want to hear about. I want to talk about the things that are on the listener's mind, not just mine. So send me a DM at the Krysta Huber on Instagram. Follow the FYX Podcast Instagram, which is at the FYX.officialpod. Remember, it's FYX with a Y. And from wherever you're listening from, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We will catch you guys next time.